Hi, this is Mike Maloney, and I've got Chris Martenson and Jeff Clark on the line with me again for another weekly discussion about what's been going on lately. So, Jeff, you're the MC here. Why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be back with you. And Chris, thanks again for joining us again this week.
Thanks. It's great to be back with both of you guys. One of my favorite times of the week.
Oh, that's great. Well, as usual, there's a lot to talk about, and I had to whittle my list down again. This week, I want to start with the big news that Janet Yellen is likely going to be the named as Treasury Secretary. The Treasury Secretary, for those who don't know, Janet Yellen used to be Fed chair. If she becomes Treasury Secretary, this is the person that, according to Wikipedia, is the principal advisor to the president on economic issues and plays a very important role in forming economic and government strategies. So you combine her history with QE, all the QE that she did, with the stimulus pumping pal that we have in office. And I think we have a situation where the amount of stimulus that we see is going to get even more crazy. Is that what you expect to see, Mike? And really, where is all this headed? I mean, this is kind of getting crazy, isn't it?
Well, I have to start my reply with somebody that I guess this was on Twitter, but Pradhan SP said, "Hey, Mike, the only reason President-elect Biden chose Janet Yellen is because you don't have to change the animation for Hidden Secrets of Money, Episode 7.
That's right.
Now, Episode 7 predicted everything that is going on with the economic slowdown, which causes the velocity of currency to fall. And the Fed's only response, and I said it in Episode 7, is to create currency and try and get it into the hands of the public. And we're at the beginning stages of this. But what's in it, I was reading a passage from my book that was written in 2007. I think that what is happening was sort of inevitable. It is interesting that Yellen is back, and she's the one sending out the money bomb dropping helicopters to stimulate the economy, and now she's back as going to be back most likely as Treasury Secretary, working in conjunction with some of the greatest inflators on the planet. And so, if we weren't actually watching a horror film, because that is what this is, it would be a comedy. What do you think, Chris?
I think we're caught in Saw 2, tragedy horror film comedy thing going on all the way. So listen, Janet Yellen, she comes off as this kindly grandmother, but I think we all saw a different side of her. It was March 2015. There was a press conference. There are all the journalists there. They're trained not to ask difficult questions, but one stood out. Pedro da Costa of Wall Street Journal at the time stood up and asked her about the fact that the Fed, its own internal counsel, had been asked by the FOMC, an internal body in the Fed, to drop an investigation into the Fed having leaked details of its money printing to a private equity firm. I think it was Medley Advisors or somebody like that, right? And so Pedro says, hey, what about that? And all of a sudden, Janet Yellen, the kindly grandmother act, it falls away, just like in Lord of the Rings when the elf queen Galadriel thinks she's going to get the ring, like, this monster came out. And you saw the other side of her. Pedro da Costa, that was his last day ever reporting on the Fed. He was summarily kicked out, public execution, as it were, in journalist speak. And everybody else got the message. You don't, confront her with tricky questions, particularly ones that speak to possible illegal activities, or at least ones that look really bad. So let's review. Janet Yellen right now is saying, we have to restore faith in the Treasury Department. I wasn't aware that the Treasury had lost faith in the people, but let's pretend that's true. And she's saying we need to improve equality in America. This is the woman most responsible for the wealth inequality that exists in America. And for her to pretend otherwise is just wrong. It's just,
yes,
it beggars belief. I can't even find the right words. It's like being lectured on the importance of human life by Ted Bundy. It just doesn't work out.
It is Saw 2. And it's funny that you talked about that grandmotherly persona that she's got. I used to when she first became Fed chair, I would sort of joke about that and say, "Oh, are you afraid of inflation? Here, have a cookie," because basically that's her. But yeah, the things in the articles that I just read, she said it in her speech that I pledge as Treasury Secretary to work every day toward towards rebuilding their dream. She's talking about for all Americans. To the American people, we will be an institution that wakes up every morning thinking about you, your jobs, your paychecks, your struggles, your hopes, your dignity, and your limitless potential. So that's from her speech. And the thing is that, all of this stimulus, wealth doesn't come from nowhere. People have to create stuff in order to have Elon Musk said that, in order to have stuff, you have to make stuff. That was when he went back to opened up the Tesla Fremont factory in violation of the county's orders. When you create excess currency, you're just cutting the currency supply up into more units. You're diluting it and transferring wealth from one sector to another. And this is a managed, government top-down, centrally planned, managed redistribution, which history proves never works because they can't know every detail about who should get what. I'm doing pretty well during this crisis financially. I got a stimulus check. I couldn't believe it that they would be sending me a stimulus check, but they did. So, this whole Saw 2, yes, this whole thing is crazy. Ted Bundy, great analogies.
Yeah, I got a stimulus check too, and that's something I certainly did not need. And let's not forget that Janet Yellen is the one who actually said right after she left her position as Fed chair that the level of U.S. debt in America is something that should, quote, keep people awake at night. And yet what's she going to do? She's going to add to that. So let's jump to
Well, how much has the debt increased, though, since then? I mean, with all the deficit spending, the stimulus, she wasn't part of the Fed with all that. That's under Jerome Powell and the current Congress that voted for all of this deficit spending and the stimulus packages. And the level of debt compared to GDP, that's our ability to pay it back is the GDP. That's what's important, debt to GDP, not the level of debt, numerical level, but the percentage of the economy. And I think we're sunk. I mean, I've got some charts that I can show that if you take the amount that we're borrowing compared to how much to where the economy is 5 years later. I had my researchers gather all of this information and create these charts, and we're going negative now. It doesn't matter how much we borrow. The economy is, the debt to GDP will be higher 5 years from now, not lower. Borrowing more, you borrow $1 now, and you only get like 60 cents worth of growth. It's really this is on a disaster, a collision course with the death of the economy. It's really, I mean, this is just numbers, and you crunch them, and it doesn't add up. The future does not look bright with the unbright things that they're doing. They're not making very bright decisions. Go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, that's for sure. That's the understatement of the year, right? Let me switch topics with you real quick. And I just want to get a quick comment from you guys. And Chris, I'll start with you. This article on COVID passports. This article says that global airline lobby IATA is joining a push to introduce so-called COVID passports to speed up the revival of international travel. And the travel pass will display test results, your test results, along with proof of inoculation. Chris, I go to Vancouver every year. I go to Grand Cayman every year. I do some international travel, but I'm not someone who's going to get this vaccine, especially in the beginning stages here. So, Chris, am I going to be locked out of international travel?
Sure sounds like it, Jeff. And I will be too, because I got to be honest, having a good vaccine that we can trust would be a wonderful thing, but those take many, many years to develop. And part of the reason is it just takes time. Here's one of the safety tests that needs to be performed. How are these people doing 4 years later? You just need time for that one, right? And there's a lot we don't know about this. Remember, this is a brand new vaccine, mRNA. It's never been tried before. We're going to do a public experiment on it. Pardon me, but I'm going to be more cautious than that. Personally, I'm going to wait and watch, and I'm not alone. A lot of the people I know who are medically trained are taking that same approach because we know what's involved in that. And this isn't to, rain on people's hope and say, we've been waiting so much on a vaccine. But yeah, I'm not going to be first in line for this thing, guaranteed. I'm going to sit back and wait and watch. And I don't like having to frame it that way, but they cut a lot of corners on this. And the biggest one is just the time necessary to understand how these things work and how they interact. And by the way, very quickly, they like to present as if a vaccine does a thing. You get a vaccine against mumps and you don't get mumps. You get one against influenza, you don't get influenza. But one of the things that's emerged through all of COVID is that there are a bunch of people out there who seem to be very resistant to COVID who got what's called the BCG vaccine, which is a tuberculosis vaccine, which is against a bacteria. But somehow it interacts with your immune system so that it also confers some amount of protection against COVID. This is a very complex machine that we call our immune system. That's what they're sort of experimenting with. And I'm going to sit back and wait and watch.
Very good. Mike, do you have a comment on this COVID passport idea?
Well, I'm going to do the same. And, I have to renew my passport. It has expired. I have not left Puerto Rico this year. And I'm hoping I don't get completely trapped down here, but I feel exactly the same way. They are, this article that you sent us, Jeff, on Bloomberg, they're talking about apps to track you and confirm that you have. So your passport will be connected with an app. And now we've got, there's another article I was just reading on the development of all the digital money in the Eurozone, digital currency. All of the sovereign currencies, the countries' fiat currencies, all of the countries around the world, these currencies are being threatened by this digital revolution. And they realize that all of these alternatives that are coming up, that if they don't do something fast, they're going to lose the control that they currently have over us and this ability to steal from us by creating more currency. I mean, when you think about it, all these central banks get to create currency, and to get it into circulation, they have to buy something. And so they get to buy up the world, whatever the Fed's balance sheet is. They bought $7 trillion worth of stuff, mostly treasury bonds, which is future taxation of the American people. It's a cash flow of future taxation. So it's enslavement. But when you combine the digital currency apps with these passports that are tracking you, and this is getting to be a pretty scary world. The amount of control that these elites are gaining over all of us is it's just, we're watching the death of freedom right now. It's horrific. So that's my comment on it. I absolutely agree with Chris. One last thing, I would like to see the first batches, huge trays of like 500 or 1,000 vials, and they're inoculating the people that are lined up to get this vaccine first. But in there, a random vial has to be picked, and the people that run Pfizer and Moderna and the president, the vice president, I want to see all of Congress lined up there. I want to see everybody that's trying to control us with digital currency and digital apps. They should be the first to get this vaccine. And it would have to be like a random sample picked out of 1,000 vials that they're giving the general population. I want to see these people be the first guinea pigs, the people that are forcing this on us.
Yeah. If they want us to take it, they can take it first and show us that it's safe. Exactly right. So
yeah, right. They can be the tasters.
Right.
It used to be tasters for kings to make sure the food wasn't poisoned.
Right.
I want
exactly.
them to be the tasters for the population.
Exactly. Okay, last topic. The stock market, Mike and Chris, just keeps going up. So the question here becomes, if the Fed is going to just continue to do QE and stimulus and all these monetary efforts that is pushing stocks up, guys, should we just cry uncle and buy stocks, even if we're buying gold and silver? Mike, what do you think?
Well, Chris and I disagree on one detail and aspect of this, I believe. I think I'm staying away from stocks. That's just not, except for like precious metals mining stocks. I'm going with alternative assets such as cryptos and mostly precious metals. I just love stuff that is three-dimensional and has weight. It exists. I can hold it. And it's been money for 5,000 years. When there's monetary demand for silver, silver is going to explode. Total insanity, a disconnection with reality that someday, and here, Chris thinks that it's just going to be a melt up. I think he'll comment on it in a second, that the Fed, whenever the stock market takes a dip, they're going to throw currency at it. I believe that what we're going to see in the future is huge volatility. And I believe that we are destined for an eventual melt up. I do believe that precious metals will eventually outperform. If you look at it right now, in this century, gold is up 600%. The stock market's up 100%. The S&P's up 150%. So gold has outperformed. This asset that people still think is tinfoil hat, lunatic conspiracy theorist asset, has outperformed stocks by 4 times, a factor of 4 times. And I have just been buying ever since 2002, and I continue. I just bought some when gold took the big drop, it hit a target that I had mapped out 2 months before, and I bought gold last Friday. And so I continue to accumulate. I think that what you're going to see is tremendous volatility. I think there's going to be a crash that the Fed can't control no matter how much they throw at it. But it will turn around. It'll have a V bounce. We'll have this big melt up. But think about the morality of this. They're creating currency, diluting the currency supply, and buying assets from brokerage houses that are then flooded with cash. And some of that flows into the stock market, that cash. So they've diluted the currency supply, stealing from all of us. When they pump up the stock market, what happens? Whoever owns the majority of the largest percentage of Amazon stock and Apple and all of the top S&P 500 companies, the funds that these brokerage houses, these indexed funds and so on, that they plow this currency into, those are allocated, they're weighted toward whoever has the biggest market caps. And so it all goes into Apple and Facebook and Google and Amazon, Netflix. And so the people that own the largest, so Jeff Bezos is going to, during this event, Jeff Bezos is probably going to be the world's first trillionaire. And it was all taken from our pockets through inflation of the currency supply. It was taken from our pockets and bestowed upon the wealthiest people on the planet. And this is what is causing this huge division in the population, this dissatisfaction that is basically causing, could cause the end of democracy, the end of free markets. The Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen, now it's going to be Treasury Secretary, and whoever is running the Federal Reserve, these inflators, they're the ones that are causing the end of America. This is the end game, and they're just going to push this thing until it breaks.
Yeah, that's very possible. Chris, they're just going to keep printing. Should we buy stocks, join the party?
I'm increasingly thinking the answer to that is yes, and I'll tell you why. It's because I think the markets are completely rigged at this point. So once you understand structurally what the markets are all about and how they operate, there's most of the trading isn't by traders anymore, right? It's computers. Like 90+% of every quote and every bid in there is a computer. So these algorithms are all out doing things remorselessly. They're little scripts, right? And if you know how the scripts are controlled, it's not hard to make the market go up if you want. So the Fed, they moved their trading desks out of New York allegedly in response to Superstorm Sandy, scared them, continuity of business. They moved them to Aurora, Illinois. You know what else is in Aurora, Illinois? The CME trading floor, where all the servers and computers are located. So they co-located magically to the one place in the country where all of these options and leverage things and things, if you wanted to control the markets, that's where you would go do it, in the CME floor, puts on the VIX, stock futures, all of that kind of stuff, right? So that's my belief system at this point in time. I've watched the markets just get rescued over and over and over again and go up. So the real question I think you're asking me is this. If the Fed was faced between a stock market collapse, which would lead to a collapse in confidence and therefore a collapse in our faith-based money system, if they were faced between that or buying stocks, which Janet Yellen is on record as saying, maybe the Fed should consider buying stocks someday, just like the Bank of Japan and the Swiss Bank, National Bank, all that. I believe in my heart of hearts, the Fed would do that first, that they would prefer to just buy stocks rather than face a collapse. So it's really a belief system. So you're not asking me fundamentally, do I think stocks are fairly valued? No, they're not. They're at their 100% mark in overvaluation historically by every measure that I can find, except 2 out of 20. So they're ridiculously overvalued. Would the Fed make them even more ridiculously overvalued to prevent a collapse? Absolutely. No question. Hands down, they would. The problem with that, which I agree with Mike on 100%, is that they're making it so that it's a rigged game and it benefits those who are already at the table. So 50% of Americans have no exposure to stock and have no hope of getting exposure because now they're ridiculously overpriced. Where would they even get the money to buy these overpriced things? It's literally like if I was the Fed chair and I took a snapshot, you know what I would do? I would say, everybody who has a cat that pukes on their carpet, because I have one of those, the Fed's gonna buy that puke for $1 billion. And oh, by the way, you can't buy cats anymore. They're too expensive. Hey, look, Chris and people like him got fantastically rich. Not our fault. Of course it was their fault. So they're picking winners and losers. They're like a reverse Robin Hood organization, as Mike is saying. They're taking money from everybody, handing it to a few, and kind of trusting that that's all going to turn out. And it's not, because as Plutarch said, the oldest and most fatal ailment of all republics is a gap between the rich and the poor. It's unfair. It is deeply structurally unfair what they're doing. And there's no way to sugarcoat that. And that unfairness leads to social tension, and eventually it leads to social disruption. Will the Fed continue to print and make stocks go up until things break? Yep. Because I don't think they know what else to do. I think they're that derelict in intellectual and emotional honesty.
Yes, good point. There's no doubting that the stock market is overvalued by almost any measure that you look at. Gold and silver, in contrast, even though they're doing well this year, are undervalued on a historical basis. And of course, they will be there for us when this thing does eventually break. So, well, this was great, Mike and Chris, though. Thanks for joining me again this week, and I'll talk to you both next week.
Before we sign off, Jeff, I want to ask Chris one question, because do you think that the people at the Fed and the Treasury understand fundamental economics? I mean, they're good at this micro stuff. They can see their formulas and equations and all of this and charts, but understanding the fundamental basics of economics, what wealth is and how they are redistributing wealth, do you think they actually understand this? And if they don't understand it, then they're incompetent and shouldn't be in their position. If they do understand it, they are complicit in the biggest crime in history and really should be in jail. What do you think?
Great question. What I think is that Janet Yellen has operated this many businesses and she's produced this much value in her life in terms of transforming raw materials into finished goods in any capacity. She has no experience with it, doesn't understand it at all. It has no basis for understanding it, no intuition around it, because she hasn't actually done any of that stuff. And that, unfortunately, is almost nearly every economist out there, save a precious few. Yes. that actually got their hands dirty in life at some point. So no, these are people who've never run a business, haven't truly managed a staff for productivity, unless the productivity is how many papers can you crank out, which is not the same thing. So at any rate, I think most of them don't understand basic economics, which is how are you adding value or how are you being a parasite on value? They don't get it.
Okay, so they're incompetent, not complicit.
Ignorant at best, incompetent at worst. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Great input,
right,
guys.
Well,
Thank
thanks,
you
Jeff.
very much. And I'll see you both on the next video.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Mike.
Bye.